Hello, everyone. So, today, sorry for the late start, but we have a guest on the stream, so I'm not going to stick around too much just on the face cam here, but we have a YouTuber by the name of Mike from the Useless Duck Company here to talk about driverless cars. So, I'm going to get the screen switched over so you can see him. And so, how's it going, Mike?
It's going okay. How are you?
So we have he's actually on his cell phone right now. We were having some trouble getting picture to the screen, and everything seemed to be going wrong. But it looks like we're finally live. Um, so you wanted to talk about driverless cars for us. So I guess you can introduce the topic, and then we'll just get into a general discussion.
What I wanted to discuss with you, there's a lot of hype around driverless cars, and people are saying, oh, all the truck drivers are going to lose their jobs in a year or two or something like that. Everything's going to be turned on its head. I don't think driverless cars are actually that close. I don't think the technology is as close as the marketing is telling everybody that it is. I feel that to have a true driverless car, first you need almost perfect humanoid AI. You almost need to create a computer human that can think like a human before you'll actually get that car on the road working as you expect, or at least before you could take the steering wheel away. And there's a few reasons why I feel that way. Are you on what side are you on? Are you on that camp, or do you think that they're pretty close?
It's to my understanding that with the artificial intelligence department and with all of the research we're doing currently, the art of moving from point A to point B and avoiding obstacles, I'm under the understanding that the technology is actually there, but there is a lot of intricacies that you can't plan for, and they always say that human randomness is something that you can't program or can't account for statistically. So I agree that there is definitely always going to be some problems that are coming along with driverless cars, but I do think that the technology, at least for major control over the vehicle, is available in the current day and age.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that I have a 2015 Chrysler 200, and I bought the one with the most important thing to me was the tech package because I wanted the self-driving features. Now it's not doesn't self-drive like a Tesla
Yeah.
or anything like that, but it has things like the radar cruise control. So once I get on the highway, I set a maximum speed, and if the person in front of me slows down or something, my car slows down
Okay.
automatically based on the radar. I can track people on the road, and it has some form of steering assist. If I start to go out of my lane, it'll steer me back in, but it won't steer me through the middle or anything like that.
Hmm.
And it has a feature to park itself, but it's really terrible. It's really bad at parking itself. It's really doesn't work at all. So I definitely think the technology is here to really assist people, to
Yeah.
keep people safer. But I have had a lot of false positives, or you could say false negatives, while driving. I had a few times where it's tracking the lane, and construction has the lane like go all wacky, and it tries to drive me into a wall or
Oh, I
something
got
like
you.
that. Luckily, the where that technology is right now is it's not a full override. It's kind of feels like a magnetic kind of pulse trying to move your wheel, but I can easily overpower it as long as I'm holding it.
Yeah.
But if I was hands off, that thing would have tried to put me into the wall,
Hmm.
something like that. So I think that's why there was a study done by Kelly Blue Book, and they were asking people if they're ready for driverless cars and if they want one. And actually, a majority of Americans, at least, they only did the states, said they didn't want it right now. They felt they would feel unsafe if they didn't have full control over the vehicle, which might
That's
not be a
actually one of the
problem.
notes I was writing down. Was I was
Yeah.
comparing it to airplanes because a lot of people have that a fear of flying because
Hmm.
they aren't in control of the vehicle. So there's statistics in the favor of airplanes versus car crashes.
Yeah.
Airplanes, there's a lot less deaths in airplanes than there are in car crashes every single year. But one thing psychologically is that people tend to want to be in direct control of their own fate. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that either people will have to change or the like you said, the technology may never be accepted because of that.
Well, that brings up that you can kind of mesh that with one of the other big arguments about auto driving cars, which is about ethics.
Yeah.
So if if it's going down the highway or it's going down a busy road, and someone like a drunk person or a kid, like a drunk person, runs into the street,
Mm.
your car has to choose what to do. If it doesn't have enough time to stop, does it go onto the shoulder where there's some mothers like walking their babies? Does it hit the person that walked into the street, or does it swerve to the left and hit the oncoming traffic?
Yeah, I think there
Now
was
you could,
actually a game, or it was sort of like a little like quiz online someone made that was a bunch of scenarios that you had to pick what the automatic car would do.
yeah.
Where it was
Oh, I
like,
think I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
you had to choose between like killing the old people or killing the children, and it's like, how do you program that um, to where,
Well, I think if I go back to your earlier point about being on the airplane, though, if you were in a horrible accident and you weren't the driver, there's no steering wheel in your car, you'd feel so powerless because your car did this to you, basically. It drove
yeah,
you into this
yeah,
accident. But one perspective I don't think people think about a lot is what about that person that ran into the road? They're also powerless in this situation. They know that no human hit them, but the computer controlling this car hit them.
yeah,
And it's almost like in a Terminator movie. Why did this machine gun me down?
yeah, yeah.
You know, it would be machines versus humans sort of at that point, and it's something that people would have to accept.
And I think that also brings up the problem of the legal issue. If someone were to be in a driverless car that um, happened to be in a circumstance where it hit someone and killed them, would the person that owned the driverless car be at fault, or would it be the company that created it?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's something that would be heavily debated with uh, just the legality in general, because it comes down to like, it's technically that person's property. It's somewhat like if a dog attacks a child down the street and
Hmm.
you're the owner of the dog, are you at fault or is the dog at fault? And um, it's a kind of gray area in the legal system.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if that ever came up with airlines. If there's a horrible crash and they go, well, the autopilot was on. You know, it's the autopilot company that developed that, not us. You
Yeah,
know,
and I'm sure
it's
if
interesting.
in airplanes, if the diagnostics can boil it down to some malfunction in the autopilot, they could definitely hold uh, the programmer or the creator of that program uh, liable for that.
Hmm.
Although I haven't seen any cases of that.
Hmm. Now, another thing that makes me think that they're a little further away than we'd expect, when people envision driverless cars, to me, they're kind of thinking about highway driving, like getting from point A to point B across the
Yeah.
highway from these two exits. Now, that's something that I think, could happen with 18-wheelers. They could start replacing 18-wheeler drivers. Like the driver just drives them to the launch point and then
Hmm.
jumps out, and then it drives itself across the country, and some other driver jumps in and drives it to the loading dock
That makes
or
sense.
something like
Yeah.
that. But if you were to actually take passenger cars and remove the steering wheels completely, how would you do something like launch a boat in the water? Or because that's something, I'm up in northern Ontario. I'm not that well. I mean, I'm in Toronto right now, but my family lives up north, and you got to do stuff off road. You got to do stuff driving through the forest. You got to put a boat in the water, take a
Of
boat out of
course.
the water. I don't know how a car, like they couldn't even get a car without a steering wheel. How would they do that type of stuff? So I
Yeah.
don't even think it would be applicable to everybody.
And I think it might end up being something where how we have manual cars and automatic cars today. The
Mm-hmm.
manual cars are still there because there are the people who like the control over when the car shifts and whether they need to be in a lower gear going uphill and whatnot. There's some things where the programming isn't as clean cut as a human driver, where you can be a little bit more fuel efficient. So I think that it may be a situation where if we do see a lot more autonomous vehicles in the future, they won't completely overrun the human aspect where the quick time decision making and the less specialization is available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. I mean, it would probably be a hybrid, like in that movie I, Robot. where everyone's driving around in their automatic driverless cars, but then Will Smith, he feels like he wants to drive manual, so a steering wheel suddenly appears. But he gets chastised by his boss later, like, "What are you doing driving manual on the highway? Are you insane?"
Yeah,
But maybe that option will still be there if you ever
yeah.
want to take that.
And I think it might be something where it's like we have emergency brakes. There's always going to be a backup if something fails. So I think that it's
Mm.
important to keep a backup system, even if it's a very uh, rough looking tiny little wheel. If it's something that can pop out and just in a quick second decision, uh, let the human take control, that
Mm-hmm.
would definitely be an important feature. One thing I did want to mention is I do see this with autonomous vehicles being very useful in public transport.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like how airplanes can pretty much fly themselves once they're in the air from point A to point B. I think that on a monotonous path, perhaps one that is restricted for autonomous vehicles, um, I could see this being a viable option for getting people from point A to point B, because one of the things that we keep bringing up is what if someone runs out into the road, and what if there's a situation that they weren't expecting. But a lot of the things that come up with these situations are due to the fact that this is a maybe like a residential area, or a situation where people could readily walk out onto the road. If we had a situation where there was a highway that was only autonomous vehicles, and perhaps there was like a bus stop kind of situation where you could get onto a vehicle and it would take you somewhere, and that could even be like a private vehicle, but it would have to meet you there at the bus stop.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that as a viable option for long distance transport of people, perhaps in a slightly more luxurious environment than a bus or a train. Um, but at the same time, still only communicating with other autonomous vehicles in order to get a person from one point to another in a very efficient, timely manner.
Yeah, I read somewhere, I think it was just a rumor that Elon Musk might be working on something like that, a special highway system just for like Teslas that could drive themselves or
Mm,
other autonomous cars. So they would have their own lane. And that would really be fantastic because that's one of the big deterrents for me from taking the train or the bus or something is I like when you get your own private bubble, you can
yeah.
set the music that you like and you're kind of on your own and then you appear right at work. You don't have to walk from a station. It's that last mile problem. So
Mm,
the autonomous vehicle could just stop, drop you off right there, and
yeah.
then you wouldn't have to park it. It would go off and do its own thing, which
Yeah.
would be pretty great.
And I definitely think, in especially with monotonous paths, this is where the autonomous vehicles really thrive, because one example, I live down in Orlando, so I'm right next to Universal. And do you know Universal Studios?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I
Okay.
went to Harry Potter World and all that.
Oh yeah, my girlfriend and her sister actually work there, but
Okay.
they have a new attraction called the Kong ride. It's sort of like a safari thing where you're in this like big long jeep with a bunch of other people, and the cool thing is there's no tracks. It actually drives itself through the ride, and
Oh, cool.
there's
I would
times
figure there'd be a
where
rail or something.
yeah, there's times where the vehicle is locked in and the actual room itself is moving, but for the most part, the vehicle itself is driving along the path. And so what's nice about the technology is that you can really get something to be driving on its own, as long as the if the path is the same every time, then the vehicle will have no problem with making the judgment calls in order to do that, because there's a lot more processing that's devoted towards like quick time decisions, as opposed to where it's going and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so I guess if there's any questions in the chat, we can have those. I'll give a few more minutes in case anybody wants to bring anything up. But is there any uh, closing points you want to make on the topic?
No, it's just that I think that you could have this vehicle that'll move between A and B on something like a highway or a road that's separated just for autonomous vehicles. But until for us to get to the point where all vehicles have no steering wheel and it could do things like drive on top of snow,
Yeah.
launch a boat, go onto the shoulder, go off roading if I needed to, I think really robust AI would have to be developed, and I think we're still pretty far away from that.
Yeah, or at least a specialized vehicle for those specific individual situations wouldn't be necessary, as
Yeah,
opposed to a all-in-one like truck that can get anywhere you need it to. I definitely
yeah,
think one last point that I forgot to mention. I definitely think there is somewhat of a news bias in reporting problems with autonomous vehicles, as
oh for
opposed
sure.
to regular vehicles, because I know there was a problem last year where a Tesla sideswiped a semi on the highway, and they were it went everywhere on the news because it's new technology. But then I always have to step back and think, well, okay, how many people that are just normally driving sideswipe semis on the highway? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have the statistics on that, but I think it's something similar to how there's this fear of airplanes and everything, because when one does actually crash, everybody knows about it. And with vehicles,
Yeah.
you don't really know the danger because there's such a necessity in life that people tend to shy away from saying, "Oh, don't use your car because it's a death trap that statistically you're probably going to crash at some point." And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that my point is that there definitely is some significant problems with the technology being introduced, and it's important to find a safe way to introduce the technology. But at the same time, I do think that in general the technology is here, and I would agree with you on the point that human control needs to be always an option in the case of a quick time event.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I think we can probably move on to the next section. But if you have any questions at any point in time for me or Mike, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we will be sure to answer them.